Hoosiers advance into the 21st century. Indiana's economy appeared to be better than ever before. Unemployment rates were low, and the housing market was booming. That was until the Great Recession. In 2007, the crisis came largely as a surprise to many policymakers, academics, and investors. Indiana and the rest of the United States was near bankruptcy. With all of Indiana's financial hardship, just 4 years later, Mitch Daniels is claiming,
"We are building for Indiana's future at a rate twice the previous all-time record. All over Indiana, the dreams of decades are becoming real. The dreams of decades are becoming real. The dreams of decades are becoming real."
But at what cost?
Back home in Indiana, it's an entirely different story. The state has a nearly $1.2 billion budget surplus.
Cutting from every government-funded agency, and two of the hardest hit, Department of Child Services and the Department of Education.
The State Board of Education presented ways to cut money from schools. Now, this comes after Governor Daniels announced there will be $300 million less in school funding.
We knew there would be some cuts. We expected that we would have some cuts, but the extent of those were a lot deeper than what we expected.
This is why I'm here, to tell you their story about how there is a small group of children who requires expensive services, and how Indiana took what little help they did have away. My name is Joe Kemp. The last 14 years, I was blessed with the opportunity to work hands-on in a residential facility with hundreds of children with autism. Because of the budget cuts by Mitch Daniels, most services that are provided by the state and all residential agencies for these children have been cut back or completely removed from their programs.
What's happening is agencies are closing down parts of their programs, or a mental health center might be running as part of their programs 2 group homes, and now they've closed two of those.
The governor promised that services would continue to be provided. They would all be community-based services, but parents can tell you, and I can tell you, that those services are really hard to come by. Just really hard to come by.
I have two male clients who really are 24/7 type of clients who the agency just decided to go 3 hours unstaffed because their funds were not available.
There's a lengthy waiting list for all of them. There's even a waiting list for applying for the services. You have to go online, make an appointment, and then wait for your time to even be able to apply for those services. And the waiting list is just phenomenal.
Problem is our waiver system through the state Medicaid waiver is so backed up that we are getting from the Bureau of Developmental Disability Services that they will not cover people until the age of 22. So we have a 4-year gap there, let alone the fact that the waiver waiting list right now is 12 years.
Yeah, but you know, when you think about it, I mean, it's vibrating things.
Bye.
You know you would like that. You would like that, wouldn't you?
This is Michael Cropper. Michael is 21 years old and is diagnosed with autism.
My name is Michelle Cropper, and I am the mother of Michael Cropper.
My name is Gary Cropper, and I'm Michael's dad.
Right. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Michael. Happy birthday to you.
They told us to begin with that he could be anywhere from a little clumsy all the way to full-blown cerebral palsy. And so they said because his coordination was going to be off. So we went through several months of going to physical therapists, and they was showing me how to an occupational therapist, to actually how to work his muscles. So for hours on end, I would just be moving his legs. I mean, at a month and 2 months old, moving his arms, moving his legs, just doing everything I could to keep the muscle tone, to get it built up. It was at the age of 2 that I started noticing little quirky things that he was doing.
Started noticing strange stuff at home, how he would be gifted in some ways. You know, he'd have a tremendous ability to remember stuff that he was interested in. At the time, it was me and Kentucky basketball, and I would watch videos, and he could just name players. I mean, and at 2 years old, I mean, he could barely talk, but he could rattle off stuff that was pretty phenomenal. But then he had some weird quirks where he would sit and stack stuff, and, you know, and get really mad if you knocked him over or disturbed him.
I mean me, not anybody else.
No.
What are you doing? You mad? What's wrong? What do you want?
Well, we went to the neonatal follow-up program, and the lady that I seen there, she kept asking me questions. And of course, in my mind, I'm thinking, why isn't she looking at him, you know, like a doctor would? I mean, I'm thinking there's something physical going on, but she kept asking me, does he get upset if you do something different? I mean, all these questions that at the time I had no clue what they meant. But she said that she believed that Michael was autistic. At that point, I didn't even know what autism was. The only thing I knew, and what I said to her was, well, he can't be autistic because autistic kids just sit in the corner and never talk at all, and Michael does talk.
Hey, what's your name?
It's Michael Copper.
All right. How old are you?
It's Michael Copper.
No, how old are you?
How old are you? That doesn't go on. It's Michael Copper.
That's your name, but how old are you?
My name is Michael Copper.
That's right, good job. Now, how old are you?
I'm 5 years old.
All right.
Autism is a complex developmental disability that causes problems with social interaction and communication. Symptoms usually start before the age of 3 and can cause delays or problems in many different skills that develop from infancy to adulthood. These autistic children also had an extra challenge, and that is due to their complicated disability. These autistic children were also physically aggressive. Most of the children with autism that are physically aggressive are frustrated because they cannot communicate their wants or needs.
The aggression was just overwhelming for me and Gary. I mean, he could flip me like a rag doll. And the thing is, that was so heartbreaking is you could see in his face that he didn't, it's not that he was directly aiming it at Gary or myself or at the girls. He was just so inwardly frustrated that he couldn't get things out.
But Michael would become very physically aggressive when there was something he didn't want to do that we were getting ready to do.
Whenever he really went on, I mean, he'd start out throwing things, and whenever you go to calm him down, then he would start hitting and kicking. You know, it was mostly, I feared his feet more because he had a lot more power in them legs, and that's what you had. Michael doesn't know how to punch and gouge. He just thrashes, and I mean, the main thing with Michael is just get close enough to block him, you know, and don't let him get a roundhouse on you. And don't let him get down and kick you up between the legs because he'll lift you up to the ceiling.
And they actually got to the point they was like, oh, thank you so much for not sending him today. I mean, they was glad that they didn't have to deal with him. They didn't want to do anything to help, but they just knew that they wasn't going to have to deal with him.
You know, months of this going on, me going to school, dropping him off, coming back an hour later and picking him up, I just kept him at home for a long time.
Trying to find some place that would be local, trying to find anything at all. We kept going to the school system, and they kept saying repeatedly, we don't care what he's doing at home.
The school resisted placement, obviously because of the costs involved, the school system did, but I think ultimately it was decided. Certainly the teacher and the staff at the school weren't able to effectively manage, you know, the behaviors in the rest of the classroom.
Not that I wanted him to be 2 hours away from me, but I had to put my feelings on the back burner for what was best for Michael.
You know, Damar worked really well at getting him off medication and getting him into a structured environment and realizing that he had no control over, he can throw the biggest fit and he's not going to get what he wants.
And it turned out that Michael stayed at DAMAR for 5.5 years.
The structured environment was the best thing in the world for Michael, where you can control his environment, keep him safe.
So he comes so far by him going to DAMAR. It was one of the best things that ever happened with us.
All of the children that were placed in these agencies because of their educational challenges were primarily funded by the Department of Education, one of the biggest programs hit in the most recent state budget cuts.
The governor decided that Silvercrest was entirely too expensive because of the level of care that they provided and the amount of diagnosis and remediation, home programming, that sort of thing. It was just very expensive.
Like a month before he was going to come out, then the state shut down all funding.
There have been a lot of statewide changes in the last 5 to 10 years, with several state hospitals closing, several big residential facilities being forced to close their doors, and the children and adults that have been placed in those settings have to go somewhere.
They actually shut down his entire unit and dispersed these kids wherever they could.
The state struggles with the fact that this is a very low percentage population, but that their needs are very extreme, and they're very expensive.
Something needs to be done because we're not providing the adequate services for these children that need intensive care.
When children require as much time and attention, as many professional people, as much input as these children require, the state has a very, very difficult time putting the priority with these children. And consequently, we are seeing major budget cuts, and parents are having to do the best they can with much, much less in the way of services.
Luckily for Michael, he finally received his funding.
You know, sugar is going, buddy.
Becky, you want to blow in that? Look at him, he's cracking up.
Michael now lives in adult services just outside of New Albany, Indiana. There, he lives with 3 other adults just minutes away from his mother's house. But for the children that are still waiting for their funding, their future is unclear.
The good news is the DCS has said, at least with the, we call it a surplus, I think they look at it more as a reserve of the $1.2 billion, that they're not anticipating any cuts in services for the next 2 years. So.
Some of our current spending cuts have been so extreme, they have cut to the core of what our government is supposed to provide. Remember, the government's core mission is to protect its citizens. Everyone can agree to that, conservatives and liberals alike.